Hello. So for my FEC, I had a particular challenge of figuring out why this dot set state was not behaving the way I wanted it to be. And so my initial challenge was when you have a particular, say, app and a button that will supposed to change the state of that overall app. And that was the intent. However, when I would press on that button, it wouldn't take one time, it would take maybe like 2 clicks for this particular app to change its state. And for the longest time, I was wondering, why would it take 2 clicks in order to make this app state change? Because in my head, I was thinking that this should automatically change it. This dot set state is an automatic function, and there shouldn't be a problem. However, through some research, I realized that this dot set state behaves a lot like a queue, in the sense that when this dot set state is clicked, there's actually a small little set state object that will appear inside the queue. And this action that I took was simply applying a lot of the concepts that we had learned over the past couple of weeks. For example, Fred had an amazing lecture about queues and stacks on how the execution order, execution stack, and it was very applicable in the same manner, such that when the app is clicked, it is not immediately setting state. Rather, the set state, the object, will be placed in a queue, which will eventually be run at some given time after. And so if you have, say, other buttons that would change the state, when all these buttons are clicked, they would all be placed inside of a queue, which in a sense would have the ability to go through the queue and change the state based off those objects. But what was really interesting was that the result from applying the multitude of lectures and kind of combining them into this one idea was super useful, because with that, you're able to think and write and plan your code a lot more logically. And because of this realization that it was a queue, it made you realize that the only way that you could particularly change the state with the specific state value that you want would be to use a callback or to use promises and stuff like that. And luckily enough, this dot set state has had a previously unknown second parameter. That second parameter was just basically for a callback, which allowed you to perform a function that basically, once this specific set state object goes through and changes the overall app state, that function will allow you to use that new changed state, which in essence makes the code a lot more synchronous, in the sense that this has a callback that will be run right after this goes through, and this has a callback that will run right after this set state object goes through as well. And the result from just this culmination of ideas and trying to figure out the patterns of how past lectures fit into this overall idea was such that I was able to save on space complexity with less lines of code. I previously had a bunch of unnecessary functions that were trying to mimic this very idea. However, one of the number one rules is to keep it simple and don't repeat yourself. And just with this idea of just having to recreate callbacks, having to create custom functions with callbacks is unnecessary, because the dot set state has that second parameter specifically built for this. And with this whole idea and this result, I was able to pass that knowledge on to some other mates who were able to utilize that for their benefit. But for me personally, the main benefit was being able to write my code in a much more concise way that had to deal with the separation of concerns. Just because the callbacks that are associated with the specific set state is attached to it inside of its function. And that was great.